I wasn't supposed to be home before 9. For 5 years, my life followed schedules. Meetings that ran late. Dinners eaten cold. Conversations postponed until tomorrow. That evening was no different. Except fate decided to bend the rules. The client canceled. The traffic cleared. And I found myself standing in front of my own house while the sun still hovered above the horizon. The house looked peaceful. Too peaceful. I remember pausing at the gate, briefcase hanging from my hand, wondering if I should text her first. I didn't. Why would I? This was my home. The front door was unlocked. That should have been my first warning. Inside, the lights were dim, curtains half drawn, the air carrying the faint scent of lavender cleaner mixed with something warmer, perfume. Not the one my wife usually wore when we went out. Softer, intimate. I called her name casually. No answer. I stepped further in, shoes quiet against the marble floor. Somewhere inside the house, soft laughter drifted, low, private, not meant to be overheard. My steps slowed. The sound came from the living room. I stood at the edge of the hallway, just before the open archway, my heart thudding harder with each step I didn't want to take. And then I saw them. My wife, Alia, stood near the window, her back half turned toward me. Her hair was loose, falling over her shoulders the way she only did at home. In front of her stood Mira, our housekeeper, the woman who had quietly cleaned our rooms, folded our clothes, and made our lives easier for the past year. They were close. Too close. Mira's hands rested hesitantly at Alia's waist, as if unsure whether she was allowed to be there. Alia's fingers were tangled in Mira's uniform collar, pulling her closer, not forcefully, but with familiarity. Their faces were inches apart. I didn't breathe. When Alia leaned forward, pressing her lips briefly against Mira's, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't stolen. It was practiced, comfortable. My mind rejected the image before my eyes accepted it. The world went silent. I didn't shout. I didn't move. I simply watched as Alia pulled back slightly, her forehead resting against Mira's, whispering something I couldn't hear. Mira smiled, nervous, conflicted, but undeniably involved. This wasn't a mistake. This was a secret. The floor creaked beneath my weight. Both of them froze. Alia turned first. Her face drained of color as her eyes met mine. Not guilt, not panic. Shock. Like a child caught playing a game she thought no one would ever see. Mira stepped back instantly, hands clasping together as if she'd been burned. Her eyes filled with fear, not of me, but of the truth finally standing in the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. I came home early, I said finally. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Alia opened her mouth, then closed it again. Words failed her. That alone told me more than any explanation could. How long? I asked quietly. She swallowed. It's not what you think. I almost laughed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply nodded slowly, letting the silence suffocate the lie before it could grow wings. Mira whispered an apology I barely heard and retreated down the hallway, footsteps quick, ashamed. She disappeared into the back of the house, leaving us alone with the wreckage. Alia took a step toward me. I stepped back. That hurt her more than anger ever could. We need to talk, she said. Yes, I replied calmly, but not tonight. I walked past her, picked up my keys from the table and paused at the door. My reflection in the glass looked older than it had that morning. Whatever this is, I said without turning around, it didn't start today. And it won't end quietly. The door closed behind me. Outside, the sky had darkened, and for the first time in years, I realized something terrifying and liberating at once. I had no idea who my wife truly was, and she had no idea who I was about to become. Chapter 2. The Silence Between Us. I didn't go far. I drove aimlessly through streets I'd known for years but suddenly felt unfamiliar, like the city itself had shifted while I wasn't looking. Every traffic light felt too slow. Every reflection in the windshield showed a man who looked calm but felt fractured. I parked near a quiet park and sat there long after the engine died. My phone buzzed once. Alia. I didn't open it. Silence was safer than words. Words could be twisted. Silence couldn't lie. For the first time since our marriage, I wondered when exactly we had started drifting. Not arguing, drifting. There was a difference. Arguments meant you still cared enough to fight. Drifting meant you stopped reaching. I stayed in the car until midnight before returning home. The house was dark. She had turned off the lights in the living room, but a faint glow came from the bedroom. I hesitated before stepping inside. Every familiar space now carried suspicion, like walls that had overheard secrets and chosen not to tell me. Alia was sitting on the edge of the bed when I entered. She hadn't changed. Her hands were folded in her lap, eyes red but dry. She looked prepared, not defensive, not ashamed. That frightened me more than panic would have. "You left," she said softly. "I needed air. You didn't answer my calls. I wasn't ready to hear excuses." She flinched slightly at that. "It wasn't an excuse," she replied. "It was something that happened." "No," I said calmly. "It was something that continued." She looked down. That was answer enough. I sat across from her, leaving a careful distance between us. For years, this bed had been neutral ground, shared, safe, unquestioned. Now it felt like a border neither of us knew how to cross. "How long?" I asked again. Alia inhaled slowly like someone bracing against cold water. "A few months?" I nodded, absorbing the weight of it. Months of glances, of moments, of lies stitched together with routine. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" Her silence stretched too long. "That's what I thought." "It wasn't about you," she said quickly, too quickly. "It didn't start because I was unhappy with you." "That's worse," I replied. "That means you were capable of betraying me even while pretending everything was fine." She looked at me then, really looked at me. "You weren't here, Evan." I let out a slow breath. "I was working, for us." "You were surviving," she corrected. "Not living." The words landed, but they didn't wound. They clarified. "So instead of telling me," I said, "you found comfort somewhere else." Her eyes filled, but tears didn't fall. "I didn't mean to cross that line." "Yet you did." "Yes." That honesty came too late. We sat there, married strangers, bound by years but divided by choice. I realized then that this wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was erosion, quiet, gradual, deadly. "What do you want now?" I asked. She hesitated. "I don't know." I stood up. "I do," I said. "I want the truth. All of it, not pieces, not softened edges." She nodded slowly, and so she told me. About how Mira had started staying late. About conversations that lingered too long. About loneliness that felt misunderstood. About one moment turning into another until the line disappeared entirely. I listened without interruption, not because it didn't hurt, because I needed to understand the battlefield before deciding how to fight or whether to walk away. When she finished, the room felt hollow. "Is it over?" I asked. Alia closed her eyes. "I told her she shouldn't come anymore." That wasn't my question. She opened her eyes again. "Yes," she said. "It's over." I searched her face for certainty. I didn't find it. "I need time," I said. "Not to forgive, to decide." She reached for my hand instinctively, then stopped herself halfway, as if remembering she no longer had the right. "I'll sleep in the guest room," she said. I nodded. That night, sleep avoided me. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying years of memories through a cracked lens. Every late meeting, every canceled dinner, every smile that might have hidden something else. By morning, I had made a decision. Not about forgiveness, about myself. I returned to work with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I canceled unnecessary meetings, delegated what I could, observed people more closely, especially myself. At home, Alia and I moved around each other carefully, like survivors of an earthquake, afraid of triggering aftershocks, polite, distant, controlled. Mira didn't return, but her absence was loud. One evening, as I stood in the kitchen pouring coffee, Alia spoke quietly behind me. "I don't expect you to stay," she said. I turned slowly. "Then why are you still here?" I asked. "Because I owe you honesty," she replied. "Even if it costs me everything." For the first time, I saw fear in her, not of being caught, but of being alone. And that's when I realized the truth I hadn't wanted to face. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about power. For years I had been predictable, reliable, safe. Now uncertainty had entered the room, and neither of us knew who would survive it. Chapter 3. The silence between us. Silence had a sound. Evan learned that in the days that followed. It wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet that came after an argument was resolved, or the comfortable stillness shared by people who no longer needed words. It was heavier than that, thick, pressing against his chest every time he walked into a room Alia had just left. They were still living under the same roof, but something fundamental had shifted. Not shattered, shifted. And that was worse. Every morning, Evan woke before his alarm. He would lie still, staring at the ceiling as pale light crept in through the curtains, listening for movement from the guest room where Alia now slept. Sometimes there was none. Sometimes he heard the faint rustle of sheets, the soft creak of the door opening. Careful footsteps down the hall. She was trying not to be seen. He noticed everything now, the way she avoided his eyes, the way she spoke less, the way her hands trembled slightly when she poured coffee. Guilt had settled into her like a second skin. And for the first time since he'd known her, Evan wasn't rushing to peel it away. At work, Evan changed. Not dramatically, not in ways that would make people whisper, but the man who once lingered at his desk, distracted by thoughts of home, now moved with quiet precision. He spoke less in meetings but said more. His emails were shorter, his decisions sharper. People noticed. "You've been focused lately," his colleague Mark remarked one afternoon, leaning against Evan's cubicle wall. Evan didn't look up from his screen. "I always was." Mark chuckled, then stopped when Evan finally met his gaze. There was something different there. Not anger, not sadness. Control. That night, Evan came home later than usual. The house was dim, the familiar warmth replaced by a cautious stillness. Alia was in the kitchen, standing by the counter, her back to him. "You're late," she said quietly. "I know." No accusation, no explanation, just two facts hanging between them. She turned slowly. "Dinner's still warm." "Thank you." They ate in silence. The clink of cutlery against plates sounded unnaturally loud. Evan could feel her glancing at him when she thought he wasn't looking, as if waiting for something, for anger, for questions, for permission to breathe again. He gave her none of it. After dinner, Alia lingered at the table while Evan stood by the sink, washing his plate with unnecessary care. "Evan," she said finally. He paused but didn't turn around. "Yes?" "I don't know how to fix this." The words trembled, fragile and exposed. Evan dried his hands slowly, deliberately, before facing her. "I don't either." That was the truth, and it hurt her more than a lie would have. Days passed, then weeks. The house became a place of parallel lives. They crossed paths like strangers, polite, restrained, painfully aware of each other's presence. At night, Evan sometimes heard Alia crying softly in her room. He never knocked, not because he didn't care, but because he was finally letting consequences exist. One evening, Evan received an unexpected message. "Unknown number. I think you deserve to know the whole truth." He stared at the screen, his heartbeat steady, almost calm. He already knew who it was. Some part of him had been waiting for this. They met at a quiet cafe on the edge of the city. Neutral ground, public but empty enough for privacy. The housekeeper, Mira, sat across from him, hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked smaller than he remembered, less confident, less certain. "I never wanted this to happen," she began quickly. Evan held up a hand. "I didn't come for apologies." She swallowed. "Then why did you come?" "Because I want facts." She nodded, eyes fixed on the table as she spoke. How it started, how it crossed lines, how guilt and secrecy twisted into something she couldn't stop. Evan listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When she finished, there was a long pause. "Did you know," Evan asked calmly, "that she was afraid I would leave her long before I found out?" Mira looked up, surprised. "She talked about you a lot." "I know." That was the final confirmation Evan needed. Not just of the betrayal, but of the imbalance. Alia hadn't cheated because she was unloved. She had cheated because she was afraid of losing control over the love she had. On the drive home, Evan felt something settle inside him. Clarity. That night, Alia was waiting in the living room when he entered. "You went out," she said. "Yes." "With her?" Her voice barely held together. "Yes." The word hit her like a physical blow. "You talked?" she whispered. "We did." Alia stood up, her composure cracking. And now I know everything." She covered her mouth, eyes filling. "Please, say something. Yell at me, hate me. Don't look at me like I'm already gone." Evan stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his presence, but not close enough to touch. "This," he said quietly, "is me staying." Her breath caught. "But it's not the way it was before." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of the room, realizing something far more terrifying than anger had taken its place. Distance. That night, Evan slept soundly for the first time in weeks. Because Chapter 3 wasn't about confrontation. It was about control returning to the person who had lost it first. And Alia finally understood. She wasn't waiting for forgiveness. She was waiting to see what kind of man Evan would become now that he no longer needed her to be whole. Chapter 4. The silence that chose a side. The house no longer felt like a home. It wasn't because of shouting or broken furniture, or dramatic scenes that left visible scars. It was the silence, the kind that settled into walls, soaked into curtains, and clung to every breath. Silence that wasn't peaceful but heavy, decisive. I noticed it most in the mornings, the way she woke before me now, careful not to disturb. The way the bed felt wider even when we were lying inches apart. The way she moved through the house like a guest who had overstayed her welcome, touching nothing for too long, leaving no trace. She had always been confident in this space. This was her territory once, her laughter in the kitchen, her voice on the phone, her presence filling rooms without effort. Now she existed quietly. And somehow, that hurt her more than any argument ever could. I didn't do it deliberately. I didn't wake up one day and decide to punish her with distance. But something inside me had shifted, settled into place like a final answer. The version of me that chased explanations, demanded honesty, and begged for reassurance had burned out. What remained was calm, controlled, observant, unreachable. She noticed it first when I stopped asking questions. No more "where were you?" No more "why didn't you tell me?" No more "do you still love me?" I didn't need answers anymore. I already had them. That realization frightened her. She tried small things at first. Familiar habits resurrected like fragile bridges. "Do you want eggs or toast?" she asked one morning, her voice tentative. "Anything is fine," I replied, not looking up from my phone. The conversation ended there. Later that evening, she waited for me to sit on the couch before turning on the television, choosing shows we used to watch together. She laughed softly at a joke, glancing at me from the corner of her eye. I smiled politely. Not cold, not angry, just distant. Distance, I learned, is far more terrifying than rage, because rage still cares. That night, she reached for me in bed, not physically, but emotionally. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly, staring at the ceiling. I turned onto my side, facing away. "There's nothing left to say," I answered honestly. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She went silent. Days passed like that. At work, my life moved forward in sharp contrast to the stillness at home. Projects succeeded. People noticed. Conversations shifted. I wasn't the distracted man with a strained smile anymore. I was focused, decisive, respected. I stayed late more often, not to avoid her, but because I finally could. My mind was clear. One evening, when I came home later than usual, I found her sitting at the dining table with untouched food. She had dressed carefully. Not extravagantly, but intentionally. Hair done, makeup subtle. The version of herself she used to be when she wanted to be seen. "You didn't answer my messages," she said. I was busy. "With work?" "Yes." A pause. "You never used to be." "I never used to know," I replied. That was the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. Not anger, not guilt, fear of replacement, fear of irrelevance. Fear that the world was continuing without her while she stood. Frozen in a moment she couldn't undo. She stood up abruptly. "Is there someone else?" The question wasn't accusatory. It was desperate. "No," I said calmly. "There doesn't need to be." She sat back down slowly, as if the strength had left her legs. That night she finally cried, but quietly, into her hands, shoulders shaking while she tried not to make a sound. I didn't comfort her. Not because I was cruel, but because comfort implies reconciliation, and I wasn't offering that. The next day, she didn't go to work. She stayed home, cleaning things that were already clean, organizing drawers that didn't need organizing. She was trying to regain control over something, anything. When I came home, she was waiting. "I don't want us to end like this," she said, standing in front of me, blocking the hallway. "This isn't how it ends," I replied. Her breath caught. "Then how?" I looked at her for a long moment. Really looked. "This is how it changes." She stepped aside. That night I slept on the couch, not out of anger, but clarity. And for the first time since everything happened, I slept deeply. In the following days, the roles reversed. She became the one waiting for messages, the one checking the clock, the one wondering where I was, who I was talking to, what version of myself I was becoming without her. And I realized something important. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to expose her. I didn't need to destroy her world. All I had to do was move forward. Because nothing hurts more than realizing you lost someone not to another person, but to their own awakening. By the end of the week, she asked the question she had been avoiding. "Do you still see a future with me?" I thought carefully before answering. "I see a future," I said. "I just don't know if you're in it anymore." That was the moment something inside her broke completely, and the moment I finally chose myself.